a rich boss invited his secretary to a company party to humiliate her. But when she arrived, everyone stood up and showed her who was really the one losing. Winter had hit the city hard. The tall grey buildings seemed even gloomier under the cloudy sky, and the streets were wet and covered in a frozen mist that seemed to freeze every corner. Amidst the morning hustle, Laura moved quickly toward the office building where she worked, her steps confident, yet hurried in the crowd. At 26 years old, she had been working as a secretary at one of the city's most prestigious investment firms for 3 years, but for her, each day was a reminder of her constant struggle to survive in a world that seemed designed to ignore people like her. The atmosphere at the company was cold, as frigid as the winter outside. Laura walked through the hallways with her head held high, although there was a weariness in her eyes that she couldn't entirely hide. To others, she was just another employee, a familiar face seen daily at the reception or running back and forth with documents and orders. However, Laura was much more than that. Her dedication and strong character had made her a reliable and efficient worker. But for her, the reason behind her efforts went beyond mere job duties. Laura lived in a small apartment in a modest neighborhood, sharing it with her mother, Doña Rosa. Her mother had been her inspiration and anchor, but in recent years, the chronic illness she suffered from had altered the dynamics of their home. Since childhood, Laura had learned to face challenges with courage, and although her mother's condition weighed heavily on her, she did everything she could to keep her stable and provide her with a decent life. The medications and special care required money that she barely managed to scrape together from her salary, and although her job at the firm was stable, every month-end was a planning challenge to cover all the expenses. That morning, while organizing some documents at her desk, Laura recalled her mother's words from the night before. "Don't worry so much about me, daughter. I'm fine as long as you're here with me." The worry on her face briefly faded at the memory of those words, and a small smile appeared on her lips. But soon, the calm was interrupted by a sharp command. "Laura, how much longer for the projections report for this quarter?" boomed an authoritative voice behind her. It was Harvey, the company director and her boss. He had a cold, calculating gaze, a presence that commanded both respect and fear among the employees. Without even looking at her directly, Harvey continued speaking as if she were just another cog in his machine. "I want that report ready in an hour, and make sure there are no mistakes. I can't waste time on unnecessary details," he added, before walking off without waiting for a response. Laura nodded, but inside she felt frustrated. She knew her work was impeccable, and that she always delivered reports on time. But, as always, Harvey treated her as if she were incapable of fulfilling her tasks. That was Laura's daily reality in the office. No matter how hard she tried, her efforts went unnoticed, and there was never any recognition, just new demands and veiled disdain. As she organized the report, her mind briefly wandered to her own life and how she had come to be here. She had had to leave her studies after finishing high school to work and support her mother, and although she would have liked to pursue a career, circumstances had never allowed it. Since then, she had taken jobs that weren't necessarily what she had dreamed of, but she had always performed them with dedication and effort, convinced that somehow time and hard work would reward her one day. Hours passed, and Laura continued her tasks without rest. Her gaze remained fixed on the screen, while her fingers moved quickly over the keyboard. She knew there were people who had joined the company after her and who already held higher positions. She knew some had connections that opened doors that always seemed out of reach for her. But Laura had never allowed her disadvantages to become an excuse. Each day, she worked with the hope that someday someone would notice her effort and dedication. As evening fell and everyone began to leave, Laura was one of the last to shut down her computer. She gathered her belongings, put on her coat, and as she walked toward the door, she felt the weight of another day where she had given her all without expecting anything in return. Outside, the cold was intense, and the mist shrouded the city lights, giving it a melancholic and somber air. Upon arriving home, she was greeted by her mother's warm embrace, who offered her a cup of hot tea. Despite her fatigue, the simple act of being at home with her mother filled her with peace. That night, as Doña Rosa recounted stories from her youth, Laura found the comfort she needed. Although the world at the office felt hostile, her home was a refuge where love and respect always existed. Laura went to bed with a sense of uncertainty. She knew the life she led wasn't easy and that her sacrifices seemed endless. But as she stroked her mother's sleeping hand, she promised herself that she wouldn't let difficulties define her. Perhaps she didn't have the recognition she deserved at work, and perhaps her boss saw her as insignificant. But Laura had something that Harvey would never understand, an inner strength that didn't depend on titles or wealth. Thus, amid the cold winter and the darkened city lights, Laura rested, knowing that, at least for this night, her daily struggle had been worth it. The next day, Laura entered the office with her usual discretion as the buzz of employees began to fill the space. The atmosphere was cold and formal, where every movement and word seemed calculated, as if everyone were in an invisible competition. The hierarchies within the company were rigid, and as a secretary, Laura found herself on the lowest rung of that pyramid. As she organized documents and reviewed her assigned tasks, she overheard conversations among the higher-level employees walking around her. Talk of vacations in exotic destinations, luxury cars, and dinners at trendy restaurants were common topics in their dialogues. They sounded like stories from another world to Laura. She felt like a spectator, trapped in a reality where such luxuries didn't exist and where her only concern was fulfilling her responsibilities to avoid jeopardizing her sole source of income. Despite being a fundamental part of daily operations, Laura was invisible to most of her colleagues, and especially to her boss, Harvey. He, with an imposing and almost theatrical presence, was the undisputed leader of the company, and he made it clear to everyone his position of power. He was a man in his 50s, always impeccably dressed and with refined manners, but his treatment of lower employees was far from respectful. Harvey moved through the office with an almost intimidating confidence, casting a calculating gaze over everyone, as if constantly evaluating who was worthy of his attention and who was not. To him, Laura was simply someone who filled her role. He had never given her the slightest sign of recognition for her dedication or skill. In his mind, she was just a modest employee who was where she was because she didn't have the education or merit he considered necessary to succeed. That day, Harvey called Laura into his office. As she entered, she maintained her composure despite the discomfort that always overwhelmed her in his presence. He was seated at his massive desk, eyes fixed on a folder of reports, not even glancing up to acknowledge her arrival. "Laura, I need you to reorganize the files from the last 3 years," he ordered, flipping through the document without paying her any attention. Laura felt a knot in her stomach. The task Harvey was asking for was monumental and not within her role as a secretary. Moreover, it involved reviewing and reorganizing hundreds of financial documents within a time limit. It was a job that would undoubtedly require many extra hours, time that Laura couldn't always afford due to the care her mother needed. "Mr. Harvey, this will take quite a while," she began to say, trying to explain the magnitude of the task, but Harvey interrupted her with a stern look. "I'm not interested in hearing excuses, Laura. If you can't handle the work, we can find someone who can," he said, in a threatening and curt tone. Laura felt the weight of his words like a stone on her shoulders. Although she knew Harvey didn't value her, his words stung. She realized that any attempt to explain her situation would be seen as an unacceptable justification in the eyes of someone like him, someone who had never had to worry about the same things she did. She left his office with her head down, feeling a mix of frustration and resignation. It wasn't the first time Harvey had assigned her disproportionate tasks or made her feel inferior with his derisive comments. However, that day, something inside her broke a little more. Although she had silently endured his insults for 3 years, it was becoming increasingly difficult to tolerate the constant disrespect. As she continued her work, the murmurs and comments from other employees seemed to resonate louder in her ears. She knew some laughed at her behind her back or commented on her situation without truly knowing her. She often heard her colleagues making assumptions about her life, suggesting that she probably hadn't advanced further because she lacked the right connections. Others even hinted that Laura was merely there to fill the quota of regular employees, a form of social diversity in an elite company. Carla, her best friend and only confidant in the office, was the one person who truly understood her. Carla had witnessed firsthand how Laura silently endured humiliation and how, despite everything, she continued to work with unwavering dedication. Every day she offered words of encouragement, reminding Laura that her worth wasn't defined by Harvey's or her colleagues' perceptions. "Don't pay them any mind, Laura," Carla said to her in a whisper during a break. "I know this place is unbearable, but you are worth so much more than they can see." Laura appreciated her friend's words, but the disdain in the office and the invisible barriers she faced daily continued to weigh on her. Carla, ever optimistic, smiled at her, trying to lift her spirits. But Laura knew that this constant struggle, though now a part of her life, was slowly wearing her down. The workday ended, and as usual, Laura was one of the last to leave. While taking the elevator down, she looked through the glass wall at the illuminated city. She felt trapped in a glass cage, as if she were always observing a world to which she could never belong. She was aware that in that building, wealth and success were measured by connections and appearances, in a power game that she had no access to. As she walked home, lost in her thoughts, she wondered if her situation would ever change. Her life seemed marked by an endless cycle of efforts without reward, a sacrifice that, in the eyes of others, meant nothing. Yet, her love for her mother and her commitment to her work were the forces that kept her standing. While crossing the dark streets, Laura couldn't help but wonder how much longer she could endure that hostile environment. She knew she was seen as less at work for not belonging to that elitist circle. But deep down, she felt a strength that reminded her of who she truly was. Perhaps Harvey and her colleagues judged her by her appearance or her role in the company, but Laura was determined to keep her dignity intact, even if it meant nothing to others. And so, as the night blanketed the city in silence, Laura returned to her small refuge, promising herself once again that, no matter what happened, she would keep moving forward. She didn't yet know how or when, but she was resolved not to let others' disdain define her. From his office on the top floor of the building, Harvey gazed at the panoramic view of the city. At first glance, he maintained his usual cold and calculating expression, an image of unimpeachable authority that commanded respect from everyone working under him. But behind that facade of success and power, Harvey harbored a dark secret that was beginning to consume him slowly. For months, the company had been embroiled in a severe financial crisis, a result of a series of risky investments Harvey had made in pursuit of high returns. His ambition and desire to maintain the image of a visionary leader had led him to make reckless decisions, and now the company was in a delicate situation. However, no one in the office was aware of it. Harvey, skilled at hiding the truth, had managed to keep the crisis a secret, doctoring financial reports and convincing his partners that everything was fine. That day, Harvey was reviewing the financial statements on his computer, watching the red numbers overflow on every line. The nerves were starting to show in his gaze, although he refused to admit it. He had exhausted almost all options, and the pressure from partners and contacts was becoming heavier than he could bear. He knew that if the situation were to be discovered, his image as a successful businessman would collapse, taking with it the connections he had worked so hard to build. For Harvey, image was everything. Since his beginnings in the corporate world, he had learned that the perception of success and stability was more important than reality itself. His fortune didn't only come from his ability to make money, but also from his skill in manipulating appearances and surrounding himself with influential people who would protect him. In his eyes, acknowledging the financial troubles of the company would be a personal defeat, one he was unwilling to accept. Desperate to buy time, Harvey devised a strategy that, in his mind, would distract his partners and maintain his reputation. A year-end party that would overshadow any doubts about the company's stability. The idea was simple, yet ambitious: to organize a lavish event where the most important figures in the company and the most influential partners would be impressed by the splendor of the celebration. If he could divert attention and reaffirm his image as a solid leader, maybe he would buy himself a little more time to find a way out. The party wouldn't be just a simple holiday celebration. No. For Harvey, it would be a carefully planned spectacle, full of ostentatious details and a display of luxury that would convey an impression of prosperity. In his mind, it was the perfect solution to deflect any uncomfortable questions while reaffirming his position of power and superiority over the other employees. However, the party also offered him an opportunity to exert his authority in a more twisted way. He remembered Laura, the modest secretary he considered an insignificant piece on his grand chessboard. In his eyes, Laura was the perfect example of someone who didn't belong in that environment. Coming from a humble background, without connections or prestige, she represented everything he despised. Harvey decided, with a cynical smile, that he would make Laura his example of power and status at the party. With calculated coldness, Harvey instructed the Human Resources Department to send a special invitation to Laura, presented in an elegant and eye-catching envelope. He knew that the invitation, with her name written in gold letters and the company seal, would make her feel out of place even before she arrived. He didn't just want Laura to feel uncomfortable. He wanted everyone present to notice the stark contrast between her and the elite environment of the party, thereby highlighting his own power over his employees. Laura's invitation wasn't a gesture of inclusion, it was a strategy for humiliation. Harvey imagined the scene. Laura arriving in her modest clothing, surrounded by employees and partners dressed in designer suits, looking around unsure of how to behave in such a luxurious setting. He would watch her from a distance, relishing the moment she realized she could never fit in an environment like that. In his mind, it was a way to reaffirm his position of power and to demonstrate to everyone that some people, like Laura, simply didn't belong in his world. As the weeks went by and the date of the party approached, Harvey became increasingly immersed in the preparations for the event. He ensured that every detail was perfectly planned. The venue would be one of the city's most prestigious halls, adorned with crystal chandeliers, tables decorated with exotic floral centerpieces, and a catering service offering the finest dishes and wines. Nothing could go wrong in his spectacle of opulence. However, as the event drew closer, he began to feel the pressure of his financial troubles more acutely. Calls from partners became more insistent, and some began to sound suspicious. Harvey doubled down on his efforts to maintain appearances, convincing himself that after the party, everything would calm down. He firmly believed that by dazzling his partners and colleagues, he could prevent any questions about the company's real state from arising. A few days before the party, the Human Resources Department sent the invitation to Laura. As he had expected, her reaction was one of confusion. Upon receiving the elegant envelope, she stared at her name in gold letters, wondering why someone like her had been invited to such an exclusive event. Harvey, from his office, watched with dark satisfaction as Laura examined the invitation with a mix of uncertainty and surprise. It was exactly the reaction he had anticipated. That night, while gazing at the horizon from his office window, Harvey felt that the plan was perfect. He was convinced that his display of power and grandeur would be sufficient to cover up the flaws and distractions he had created. In his mind, he already envisioned his partners toasting and laughing, impressed by his ability to organize an event of this magnitude. For Harvey, the year-end party was not just a celebration, it was a performance, an opportunity to demonstrate that while some didn't belong to his world, he was far above them. However, what Harvey didn't suspect was that in his attempt to humiliate Laura and manipulate those around him, his own arrogance would spark the beginning of his downfall. Winter continued to advance in the city, and as the date of the party approached, Tensions in the corporate atmosphere grew, silent and hidden, waiting for the right moment to come to light. The day had begun like any other in the office. Laura was organizing documents at her desk, lost in her thoughts and the monotony of administrative tasks, when she noticed an unusual envelope placed among the papers. It was ivory-colored, with her name engraved in golden letters, and upon seeing it, a mix of curiosity and nervousness coursed through her. She had never received anything so luxurious or elegant, let alone from the company. She glanced around, as if seeking an explanation, but her colleagues were focused on their own tasks, ignoring her as always. Slowly, she opened the envelope and pulled out a card that appeared to be made of the finest and most delicate paper. It was an invitation to the company's year-end party, an event in which, as far as she knew, only executives and top partners participated. She read the invitation several times, trying to process what it meant. She had never attended a party of such caliber, especially not one where formal etiquette and luxury were essential. For someone like her, whose salary barely covered basic expenses and her mother's treatment, attending such an event seemed completely out of reach. Laura felt a mix of emotions: confusion, uncertainty, and an odd sense of discomfort. Why had she been invited? Why her, of all people? In her mind, the suspicion began to form that this invitation was not a simple gesture of inclusion. She knew Harvey well and understood that behind that apparent courtesy there could be a hidden motive. He had never valued her or treated her with respect, reminding her every day in some way that she was nothing more than a secretary without enough merit to aspire to anything more in the company. With the envelope still in her hands, Laura recalled all the times Harvey had ignored her, or worse, dismissed her work as if it were irrelevant. Why, all of a sudden, was he inviting her to an exclusive party where she would be the only employee of her rank? It was clear this wasn't recognition. Something inside her told her it was a trap, another attempt by Harvey to make her feel that she didn't belong in his world. As she pondered this, her hands trembled slightly. Uncomfortable, her first impulse was to decline the invitation. Why attend a place where she would surely be the target of disdainful looks and comments? She knew that for the other guests, her presence would be a surprise, and not a pleasant one. She could already imagine the critical glances, the gestures of contempt, and the disguised laughter that would arise around her. But as she analyzed the situation, a different feeling began to grow within her. Rejecting the invitation would give Harvey what he wanted: proof that he could intimidate her, that her life and position made her less and limited her. What if, instead, she accepted the challenge? What if she attended, not to fit in or please anyone, but to prove to herself that her worth went beyond appearances? The decision was not easy. The idea of facing that elitist environment filled her with doubts, but at the same time, something within her urged her not to be intimidated. Laura then realized that if she accepted the invitation, she would do so on her own terms. She had no intention of impressing anyone or fitting into an environment that would look down on her. She would go with dignity, showing that her self-worth didn't depend on what others thought of her. In that moment, she took a deep breath and told herself that she wouldn't allow Harvey or anyone else in that company to determine her value. For the first time in a long while, she felt a spark of courage mixed with determination. If Harvey thought he could humiliate her with a simple invitation, he didn't know her well enough. Laura knew that despite her financial situation, her modest lifestyle, and the harshness she faced every day, her dignity was intact, and she wouldn't let anyone's disdain define her. At the end of the day, she carefully placed the invitation in her bag and left the office with her head held high. Although doubts lingered, she had decided not to be intimidated. She would attend that party, not as a figure of mockery or inferiority, but as a strong woman, someone who wouldn't yield to her boss's malicious intentions. That night, upon arriving home, she told her mother what had happened. Doña Rosa, with her wisdom and tenderness, took her hands and said, "Daughter, No one has the right to make you feel less. Go and show that your worth doesn't depend on what they see. Her mother's words were the final push she needed. With her support and the love she had always given her, Laura felt ready to face any challenge. The next step would be to find something to wear for the occasion, and she knew she would need help for that. In her mind, she was already planning to ask Carla, her best friend, and the only person in the office she fully trusted. Carla had always been her support during the toughest times, and Laura knew her friend wouldn't let her face this challenge alone. With a mix of nerves and determination, Laura went to sleep that night, repeating to herself that she wouldn't allow Harvey's intention to humiliate her to take effect. She would go to the party and prove that despite her circumstances, her worth and integrity were far above the superficial perceptions of others. Thus, as the city slept under winter's cold mantle, Laura prepared to face perhaps one of the most challenging nights of her life. But deep down, she knew she was ready for the challenge, that her strength went beyond appearances, and that no one, not even someone like Harvey, could make her feel less than she knew she was. The next day, Laura arrived at the office with the invitation still tucked in her bag, a constant reminder of the challenge she had decided to face. As she worked, she looked for the right moment to speak with Carla. She needed her friend to share her doubts and fears, and above all, to find a practical solution for her clothing dilemma. She knew that to attend such a party, it was expected that she wear something elegant, but her financial situation didn't allow for spending on luxury attire. As soon as she had a moment free, Laura approached Carla's desk. With her ever-present smile and positive energy, Carla greeted her warmly. Carla was a cheerful spirit and a loyal friend, someone who had shared many of Laura's ups and downs at the company. She was well aware of how Harvey treated Laura and had witnessed the subtle humiliations he inflicted on her. Upon hearing the story of the invitation, Carla frowned, immediately guessing the true intention behind it. "Did he really invite you to that party? You know he just wants to make you feel uncomfortable, right?" Carla said, crossing her arms and looking at Laura with an expression of unconditional support. "I know, Carla, but if I don't go, it would be like giving him the satisfaction of thinking I don't belong there," Laura replied with determination. "I want to go, not to please them or fit in, but to show that I'm not intimidated." Carla looked at her in silence for a moment, before nodding with a smile full of complicity and admiration. "You're right. You won't give him that pleasure. And don't worry about the dress. I know exactly how we can get something elegant without you having to spend a fortune." With her friend's determination backing her up, Laura felt the weight of her doubts lift. Carla had a plan and was ready to help her with every detail. That same afternoon, after work, the two friends went to a local store that Carla knew well. It was a discreet place that sold simple yet elegant dresses, pieces that didn't need designer labels to stand out. Carla firmly believed that style didn't depend on the price of the garment, but rather on the confidence and attitude with which it was worn. As they browsed the store, Carla selected several dresses for Laura to try on. She knew her friend's financial situation was complicated, and she wouldn't let her feel uncomfortable about it. Laura, for her part, tried on the outfits with a mix of excitement and nervousness. She wasn't used to such attire, and seeing her reflection in the mirror, dressed in a sleek, elegant design, made her feel for a moment like someone entirely different. "It's perfect," Carla said, watching Laura with an approving smile. "You look incredible, and most importantly, it's simple, like you, but elegant. You don't need more to show who you are." Laura smiled shyly, adjusting the dress as she gazed at her reflection. The dark blue dress fell softly, discreetly but sophisticatedly highlighting her figure. It was a perfect choice, simple and in line with her style. Despite the dress's simplicity, Laura felt that with it, she could face anyone at the party without feeling out of place. Carla, not losing her enthusiasm, insisted on helping her with accessories and hairstyling. "You don't have to do anything extravagant. Remember, true beauty lies in attitude, in how you feel about yourself. And you, my friend, have more character and strength than any of them," she said, adjusting Laura's shoulders affectionately. During the ride home, Carla spoke to her about how to face the night with dignity. "Look, Laura, you are an incredibly strong woman, and everything you've accomplished has been through your own effort. Those people live in a bubble of privilege that makes them think they're superior. But you know that true worth doesn't depend on bank accounts or last names. Don't let them make you feel less." Carla's words touched Laura's heart, reminding her of how important it was to have someone by her side during moments like this. She wouldn't be alone in this challenge. Although she would face the night by herself, she knew Carla was with her in spirit, supporting her and giving her the strength she needed. That night, back in her small apartment, Laura hung the dress in her bedroom, looking at it with a mix of anticipation and calm. She knew that what she would face at that party wouldn't be easy. Surely upon entering, the disdainful gazes would fall upon her, derisive comments would be made behind her back, and Harvey, with his usual cynicism, would put her in the spotlight to highlight her inferiority. But now she had something that no one could take away from her, the conviction that her dignity didn't depend on those people's opinions. Laura spent the night mentally preparing herself, recalling Carla's words and the promise she had made to herself. She wouldn't go to the party to impress anyone, but to prove to herself that despite the difficulties, she could always hold her dignity high. That night would not just represent attendance at a luxury event. It would be her personal challenge, her way of confronting the hostility of an environment that sought to belittle her at every turn. As she settled into bed, Laura felt a strange peace. She didn't know what the night of the party would hold for her, but she was certain of one thing. She would walk in with her head held high, unafraid of the stares or comments. And with Carla's help, she had not only found the right dress, but also the confidence she needed to face everything that awaited her. Thus, Laura prepared for a night in which she would prove not only to Harvey, but to herself, that true strength comes from staying true to her values, and that a person's dignity is priceless. The day of the party had arrived, and Laura woke up with a mix of nerves and determination. She knew that night would be a test for her, a stage where, undoubtedly, the critical and mocking eyes of her colleagues and superiors would look for a reason to dismiss her, whether in her appearance or attitude. However, she also knew that from the moment she decided to attend, she had made a commitment to herself to face the situation with dignity and not be intimidated. She spent the day in a state of apparent calm. She went to the office, fulfilled her daily tasks, and avoided thinking too much about what would happen that night. Carla, always attentive and protective, approached her several times to ask how she was feeling and to remind her that she would be there in spirit, supporting her and reminding her that a person's worth doesn't depend on others' judgments. At the end of the day, Laura returned home and prepared herself with the care and calm Carla had recommended. She hung the dress on her wardrobe door, examining it closely, and feeling that, in a way, that garment represented more than just a fashion choice. It was a symbol of her determination to confront the elitist environment of the party and Harvey's intentions to make her feel less. She showered, styled her hair simply, and applied subtle makeup, just enough to enhance her natural features. When she finally slipped into the dress, a mix of emotions washed over her: nervousness, pride, and above all, an internal calm that reminded her she didn't need anyone's approval to know who she was. Before stepping out, she said goodbye to her mother, who looked at her with admiration and smiled tenderly. Doña Rosa embraced her and whispered in her ear, "You're so strong, daughter. Remember that no one can take away your dignity, and we're all very proud of you." Her mother's words gave her the final boost of confidence, and Laura left her apartment feeling ready to face the night. When the taxi dropped her off in front of the luxurious event hall, the first image she captured was the imposing entrance illuminated by large chandeliers and decorated with exotic flowers and crystal arrangements. Luxury cars lined the entrance, and people dressed in suits and designer gowns seemed to step out of a fashion magazine. For a moment, Laura felt out of place, but she recalled Carla's words and the promise she had made to herself. Taking a deep breath, she walked through the door with her head held high. The main hall was a spectacle of opulence. The walls were adorned with golden details. The high ceilings were decorated with crystal chandeliers that illuminated the room with a warm glow, and the tables were covered with velvet tablecloths and floral arrangements that seemed overly extravagant for a year-end party. Laura scanned the room, trying not to be intimidated by the luxury surrounding her. As she moved among the guests, some began to notice her presence. Eyes fell upon her, some with curiosity, others with a clear mix of disdain and surprise. Laura felt the scrutinizing stares, trying to decipher whether she deserved to be there. But she continued walking calmly, refusing to let the murmurs or comments affect her. Her determination was clear. No one would take her dignity away, and she wouldn't be intimidated by an environment trying to belittle her. Then, as if he had been waiting for that moment, Harvey appeared among the crowd and approached her with a condescending, rehearsed smile. Dressed in a crisp dark suit and wearing his usual air of self-sufficiency, Harvey surveyed her from head to toe, as if evaluating every detail of her appearance. "Laura, I'm glad you could make it," he said in a tone that sounded polite but was loaded with subtle irony. "I hope you didn't feel uncomfortable with the invitation. I know these events aren't usually aimed at employees of your position." Laura maintained her composure, looking him in the eyes and responding with a firm but polite tone. "Thank you for the invitation, Mr. Harvey. I don't usually attend events like this, but I decided to come to celebrate with my co-workers. After all, we are all part of the team." Harvey raised an eyebrow, surprised by her response. He seemed not to expect this calm and confident answer. He attempted to keep the conversation in a condescending tone, as if he couldn't allow Laura to throw him off balance. "Well, of course, it's important for everyone to feel part of the team. It's just that, well, not everyone has the same adaptability, right? But I'm glad to see you're making an effort," he added, forcing a smile. Laura understood the comment as another attempt to make her feel out of place, but she held her ground. "That's true, Mr. Harvey. We all make an effort in our daily work. I'm sure that with respect and dedication, any environment can be suitable for everyone," she replied calmly, her serenity causing Harvey to frown for a moment. As their conversation continued, some nearby guests observed their interaction with interest. Initially, they had looked at Laura with disdain or indifference, but seeing the calm and dignity with which she responded to Harvey, some began to change their expressions. Although the environment was hostile, and most still viewed her as someone who didn't belong to that circle, Laura was starting to gain the admiration of a few attendees. Harvey, visibly annoyed by Laura's lack of discomfort, decided to change tactics. He left her momentarily to speak with other guests, but from a distance he continued to watch her, waiting for any sign of vulnerability that he could exploit against her. Laura, however, remained calm, moving around the hall and enjoying a glass of wine with the same ease with which she had arrived. After a while, the night reached its peak when Harvey announced the moment for the toast. With a glass in hand and a triumphant expression, he addressed the guests, thanking them for their presence and speaking about the successes the company had achieved over the year. From her spot, Laura observed how Harvey projected the image of an untouchable leader, convinced that everyone believed in his speech. However, in the midst of the toast, something unexpected happened. James, one of the most respected executives and an ethical figure in the company, stepped forward and took the floor before Harvey could continue. James looked at the attendees with a serious and sincere expression and began to speak about the true effort and dedication behind the company's achievements. "Tonight, as we celebrate, I want to recognize those who have worked tirelessly to achieve the successes we are celebrating," James said, his voice clear and firm, resonating in the hall. "There are people in this company whose effort and dedication often go unnoticed, people who, with their quiet work, have supported this company through difficult times." Harvey watched him with discomfort, trying to smile, but his expression betrayed his confusion. Laura, unexpectedly, felt that James's words were directed at her, even though he didn't mention any names. James continued, making it clear that true success didn't come solely from the visible figure of leadership, but from the work of those who, like Laura, made the company's daily operations possible. As James spoke, attendees began to look at Laura with a mix of surprise and respect. Some who had previously judged her superficially were starting to see something more in her. The calm with which she had held Harvey's gaze and the dignity with which she moved among the crowd spoke of a strength that, until that moment, many had overlooked. Harvey, aware that attention was shifting away from him and his plan to humiliate Laura, tried to regain control of the speech, but it was too late. James had captured everyone's attention, and what should have been a night of glory for Harvey was turning into a night of recognition and admiration for Laura. When the toast concluded, several partners and executives approached Laura to discreetly congratulate her on her strength. Although Harvey tried to ignore her for the rest of the night, the respect that others began to show her was evident, and he could not help but feel thrown off balance and furious. His attempt to make Laura feel inferior had failed, and instead, it had led to a recognition he had never anticipated. Laura, for her part, felt that she had passed the test. She had arrived at the party with the promise of staying true to herself, and she had succeeded. Not only had she faced Harvey's disdain and that of other guests, but she had shown, with her calm and dignity, that true worth does not depend on status or appearance, but on inner strength and integrity. The night drew to a close, and as Laura left the hall, she felt a peace and pride she had never experienced before. She knew that although her path in the company would remain difficult, something had changed that night. She had earned the respect of some, and most importantly, she had proven that she didn't need to be anyone else to face any challenge. The night had advanced, and the atmosphere in the luxurious event hall was becoming increasingly solemn. Harvey, with a triumphant expression, had resumed speaking after James's toast. He tried to regain control of the evening, reinforcing his narrative of success and undisputed leadership. Most guests followed his words, some impressed by the display of luxury and others maintaining appearances, but a few, like James, looked on with a mix of discomfort and skepticism. Laura stood in a corner of the hall, observing from a distance the power show that Harvey was trying to project. Although she still felt the gazes of some guests upon her, she had begun to notice a change in the atmosphere since James's intervention. The words of that executive, filled with sincerity and gratitude towards the true workers of the company, had given her an unexpected sense of pride and respect for herself. Laura knew that James had not limited his recognition to the anonymous efforts of employees like her. His speech had been, at its core, an act of courage, a declaration against the elitist system that dominated the company's culture. As Harvey continued speaking, with his calculated phrases and tone of superiority, James exchanged a glance with Lily, another executive at the company, and discreetly nodded. Lily, a woman respected for her ethics and professionalism, had watched for years as Harvey treated his inferior employees and exploited their achievements to bolster his own reputation. She knew better than anyone how much Harvey had manipulated the company's merits, claiming credit for accomplishments that were not his, and she had always been deeply bothered by the way Laura was relegated and treated with disdain. With unyielding calm, James stepped forward among the guests, and without waiting for Harvey to finish his speech, raised his voice to capture everyone's attention. "Sorry to interrupt, Harvey, but I think this is a good opportunity to talk about the true value of our company," James said, his tone firm but serene. Harvey, bewildered by the interruption, tried to maintain his smile, although his eyes betrayed his discomfort and displeasure at the intrusion. James didn't give him time to react. He confidently advanced to the center of the room, drawing the gazes of everyone. "This company has been sustained not only by the big deals and the connections that we pride ourselves on," James began, addressing the group of executives and partners gathered, "but by the daily efforts of those employees who, in the shadows, carry on their shoulders the work that allows us to remain here." The attendees fell silent, and some began to murmur, surprised by the direction James's intervention was taking. Laura, from her corner, listened intently, her heart racing. Something in James's voice gave her the assurance that he knew what he was doing and that in some way she was part of that message. Harvey, visibly annoyed, attempted to intervene. "Of course, James, we all know that the team is essential, but tonight we're celebrating something more than that. We're celebrating the leadership that enables the team to function as a unit. Without solid guidance, no organization can thrive," he said, trying to regain control of the conversation and redirect attention to his own figure. James looked at him calmly, maintaining his firm stance. "Precisely, Harvey, and that's why I believe it's fair to recognize those who rarely receive the credit they deserve. There are employees who sacrifice every day, who do impeccable work, but unfortunately are not always valued as they should be. I'd like to take this opportunity to mention one person in particular who represents that silent effort, someone whose work has been crucial to many of the successes we celebrate today." At that moment, all eyes turned to Laura. Harvey, visibly irritated, fell silent, unable to intervene without exposing his discomfort. Laura felt heat rising to her cheeks and her breath quickening. She had never expected to be the center of attention in that way, let alone in such an environment. However, something in James's gaze, warm and respectful, gave her the confidence she needed to face the moment. "Laura," James continued, addressing her with a genuine smile, "your dedication and professionalism have been invaluable to this company. You are one of the reasons we can celebrate today, and I believe everyone here should know that." The silence in the hall was palpable. Some executives looked at Laura in surprise, and others with a hint of shame, realizing that until that moment, they had not paid attention to the work of an employee they had always considered inferior. Laura, though overwhelmed, held her gaze steady on James, feeling that for the first time, someone saw in her more than just a secretary. Harvey, unable to contain himself, interjected with a forced laugh. "Of course, we all value Laura's work, but let's remember that tonight we are here to celebrate those who lead the company toward new horizons." It was then that Lily stepped forward. She had been watching in silence, but James's words and Harvey's audacity compelled her to act. With a calm yet firm voice, Lily took the floor, addressing everyone present with a conviction that made it clear her upcoming remarks were not merely casual commentary. "Harvey, I think we're all aware of your role in the company, and of course, the role of many others," Lily said, looking around at the group, including James and several other employees. "But we have also seen how certain merits have been managed, and how some employees have been ignored or relegated without reason. At times, it seems that the achievements of others have served to allow certain individuals to project an image of success that in reality does not belong to them." The atmosphere in the room tensed. Lily had touched a delicate point, and all present understood, though some were reluctant to admit it, that her words directly alluded to Harvey and his management of the company. Harvey tried to laugh again, but his gesture quickly crumbled. Lily continued without hesitation, addressing the partners and executives with the same firmness. "There are aspects of this company that many of you are unaware of. For years, Harvey has tried to conceal the financial problems caused by risky investments and questionable decisions. The financial reports have been manipulated, and some successes have actually been the result of the work of employees who were never recognized." Lily's revelation fell like a bombshell. Partners and some of Harvey's closest executives began exchanging looks of confusion and anger. They knew Lily was an honest woman, someone who would never speak without basis. At that moment, Andrew, one of the main partners and a figure of great respect among the attendees, intervened, looking at her seriously. "What are you talking about, Lily? Do you have proof of what you're saying?" he asked, his tone stern yet receptive. Lily nodded and pulled out a folder she had brought with her. She had prepared it in advance, suspecting that sooner or later someone would need to confront Harvey and his system of manipulation. She handed the folder to Andrew, who began to review the documents carefully. Inside were accounting records, emails, and other documents that evidenced Harvey's poor financial decisions and attempts to cover up the losses they had caused. As Andrew read through the documents, his expression grew increasingly serious. Finally, he looked up and addressed the present partners, saying, "Here is enough evidence that Harvey has been manipulating the company's accounting to hide his mistakes. Additionally, it demonstrates that several of the achievements attributed to him actually belong to other employees, including Laura." Harvey tried to defend himself, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and desperation. "This is absurd. You're fabricating lies to discredit me. Everything I've done has been for the benefit of the company. These accusations are unfounded." However, his words no longer carried the same weight. The evidence was overwhelming, and the support of Lily and James was unbreakable. Partners and some of the executives present began expressing their disappointment and anger. Harvey, cornered and aware that his image as an untouchable leader was crumbling, tried to find a way out, but every word he said sounded hollow and defensive. Employees who had remained silent for years, out of fear or respect for Harvey, began sharing their own experiences of contempt and manipulation. One by one, they revealed moments when Harvey had used his power to intimidate and dismiss the work of those he deemed inferior. The scene was a true reckoning. Harvey, seeing he had lost control, exited the hall in silence, leaving behind an atmosphere of bewilderment and reflection. Laura, still processing everything that had transpired, felt an unexpected calm. That night, which he had planned as an act of humiliation toward her, had transformed into the beginning of his own downfall. After Harvey's departure, several partners and executives approached Laura and the other employees to express their recognition and apologize for years of silence and lack of acknowledgement. James and Lily, who had defended the dignity of the employees with courage, became her allies and friends, assuring them that from that moment on, the value and effort of each individual would be recognized. Laura, though overwhelmed by emotions, felt a deep satisfaction. She knew that the night had not only marked a change in her professional life, but also in the company's culture. That party, which was supposed to be a celebration of power and elitism, had turned into an act of justice and recognition for all those who, like her, had been ignored and belittled. Harvey's hasty exit left the attendees in a state of confusion and discomfort. The golden lights and lavish arrangements in the hall contrasted sharply with the tense atmosphere that lingered after the revelation. Murmurs began to ripple through the room as partners and executives gathered in small groups, quietly discussing what they had just witnessed. For many, Harvey's untouchable image had crumbled in minutes, and they were now trying to process the consequences. Laura remained silent, absorbing everything that had happened. The situation still seemed surreal. She had never imagined that a night meant for apparent humiliation would turn into the moment when Harvey, her boss and the man who had been a figure of power and disdain in her work life, would see his mask fall. The satisfaction of knowing that the truth was finally exposed filled her with an unexpected peace. Yet, she also felt the weight of responsibility. Now that everyone knew Harvey's true nature, the future of the company was at a turning point. It was Andrew, the main partner and respected leader among the group of investors, who broke the silence and addressed the attendees. Andrew, a man of strong principles, was known for his ethics and focus on transparency. His face reflected a mixture of disappointment and determination. It's evident that we must take immediate action. What we have witnessed today is not just a betrayal of trust, but a lack of integrity that we cannot allow in our company, Andrew began, looking seriously at his colleagues and the employees. We are committed to restoring transparency and honoring the efforts of all who have worked here with dedication. Andrew then turned to James and Lily, thanking them for having the courage to expose the truth, and then looked at Laura with an expression of respect and gratitude. Laura, not only have you shown admirable integrity, but your work and dedication remind us of what it truly means to be part of this company. From this moment on, we want to ensure that you and all employees receive the recognition and respect you deserve. The employees began to applaud in recognition of Laura and those who had dared to stand up for the truth. The atmosphere, once charged with tension, began to transform into one of hope and renewal. The partners and more conscientious executives joined in the applause, understanding that it was time to support a new direction for the company. Meanwhile, in a nearby room, Andrew, James, and Lily began discussing the immediate decisions that needed to be made regarding the company's leadership. Andrew proposed a reorganization of executive positions, ensuring that positions of power would be occupied by individuals with integrity and respect for all employees, regardless of their rank or backgrounds. "We must set an example," Andrew said, his voice firm. "This company must be a place where every person feels valued. We need leadership committed to justice and ethics. I believe the time has come to reconsider how we run this organization and ensure that our employees receive the support and recognition they deserve." After a brief but intense exchange of ideas, Andrew looked at Laura and proposed a change that left her speechless. "Laura, we want to offer you a leadership position in the company. We know that you have demonstrated unwavering ethics and dedication. Someone like you can make the difference we need to renew the culture of this company." Laura, though surprised, felt a mix of pride and responsibility. She had never imagined that, after so many years of effort and sacrifice, she would be recognized in this way. The offer excited her, but it also intimidated her. Taking on a leadership role meant facing new challenges and learning to navigate a realm she had only observed from a distance. "Thank you, Andrew," Laura responded, her voice trembling but firm. "I accept this opportunity with humility, and I commit to working so that everyone in this company feels valued. I believe that together we can create a place where everyone's efforts are recognized and respected." Lily and James, who had been her main advocates that night, smiled at her with pride. They knew that Laura would bring a perspective of empathy and justice to the leadership of the company and were ready to support her at every turn. With the backing of Andrew and the other partners, Laura took her first step toward her new leadership position. The partners decided to implement a series of changes to transform the structure and culture of the company. They began designing professional development programs for employees, providing opportunities for growth and learning, and established transparency policies to ensure that everyone's work was properly recognized. That same night, Laura gathered the courage to address all the employees and executives who were still in the hall. Although she wasn't used to speaking in public, she knew this was a crucial moment and that her words would mark the beginning of a new era. "Tonight, we have seen how the truth can open our eyes and show us the way to something better. I have worked in this company for years, and although many times I felt that my efforts went unnoticed, I have always believed in the value of honest work and mutual respect," Laura began, looking at her co-workers and colleagues. "Now that I have the opportunity to contribute to the change, I want to ensure that everyone here feels they are part of a team where their efforts are valued. It doesn't matter where we come from or what our role is. We all deserve respect and recognition." The room erupted in applause, and many employees approached her to congratulate her and express their support. For those who, like Laura, had spent years relegated and belittled, her speech represented a new hope. The transformation she promised was more than a simple change in policy. It was a declaration of respect and dignity towards every member of the company. Andrew and the other partners, inspired by Laura's words, began discussing the implementation of an ethics committee that would oversee fair treatment for all employees. They also proposed a support fund for those facing personal difficulties, inspired by Laura's dedication to her mother, Doña Rosa, over the years. Laura's story, her strength, and her sacrifice would become the central example of the new philosophy of the company. As the employees and partners dispersed, Laura took a moment alone in the hall, reflecting on the unexpected turn her life had taken that night. In her thoughts, she recalled Carla's words, who had always told her that her dignity and character were her true value, and she realized that through her perseverance, she had not only changed her own destiny, but also that of many others. That night, Laura not only gained the respect and recognition she deserved, she also planted the seeds of a workplace culture based on empathy and justice. The truth had come to light, and the company, now under her influence, was destined to become a place where each person was valued for their merits and where ethics and integrity were the fundamental pillars. As she left the hall, Laura took one last look at the bright and luxurious decorations that had been the backdrop for Harvey's revelation. Now she understood that true change did not depend on opulence or status, but on the actions and values of those who were part of the company. With a new vision and a firm conviction that her struggle had not been in vain, Laura prepared to face the future with the same dignity and courage that had guided her thus far. The days following the party marked a radical shift in the company. Harvey's departure left a void in leadership, but it also opened the door to a profound and necessary transformation. For many employees, that night had been a revelation. For the first time, they saw that effort and integrity could challenge the power system that had governed the company for so long. Laura, still surprised by the proposal that Andrew had made to her, began to take on her new role with caution and humility. Although she felt honored and excited, she also knew that the challenge ahead was enormous. Until just a few days ago, she had been the invisible secretary, relegated to minor tasks, ignored and belittled by many of her colleagues. Now, in her new leadership position, she felt the responsibility not only to improve her own fate, but to transform the company culture into a space where every employee was valued and respected. Her first morning in her new position was a mix of nerves and determination. Laura arrived early, walking the halls with her usual simplicity, but this time she felt the respectful and curious gazes of her colleagues. Many of them, employees who had been ignored or mistreated under Harvey's command, smiled at her and greeted her with enthusiasm that she had never seen before. For them, Laura represented new hope, a real and tangible change that promised a fairer and more humane company. Andrew and Lily welcomed her to her new office to discuss the first steps of her reorganization plan. From the outset, they offered her their unconditional support, assuring her that she wouldn't be alone in this process. Andrew, as one of the most influential and respected partners, understood the importance of backing Laura not only with words, but with concrete actions. Together, they decided to implement a series of structural changes that reflected the values of transparency, respect, and equity they now wanted to promote. James and Lily joined Laura's team to support her in her new mission. The first decision was to establish a professional development program for all employees, allowing them access to mentorship, training, and growth opportunities. Laura knew that, like her, many employees felt their chances for advancement were limited, and she wanted everyone to have the opportunity to demonstrate their true potential. Under the new management, leadership positions would no longer depend on social connections or status, but on the effort and merit of each individual. As the development program was launched, Laura and Lily focused on another crucial initiative, the creation of a support fund for employees in vulnerable situations. Inspired by her own personal experience caring for her sick mother, Laura understood how challenging it could be to work while facing personal and financial difficulties. The fund would provide financial and emotional assistance to those going through tough circumstances, ensuring that no one in the company felt alone or abandoned. The announcement of the fund was met with great enthusiasm from the employees. Several approached Laura to thank her personally, sharing their own stories of sacrifice and struggle. Some of her colleagues, who had previously not exchanged words with her, now looked at her with admiration and respect, feeling inspired by her journey. Laura, though overwhelmed by the support, felt deep gratitude toward those who confided in her, and each story reminded her of why she had accepted this new role. Another significant change that Laura introduced was the establishment of an ethics committee that would oversee fair treatment for all employees. This committee would be responsible for reviewing and updating internal policies to ensure that every person in the company was treated with respect and that everyone's merit was recognized. Lily, who had been a constant voice against the injustices of Harvey, took on an active role in the committee, committing to uphold the integrity of the new organizational culture. For many employees, these changes were a clear sign that the company was moving toward a better future. The atmosphere in the office began to transform. Employees who had previously worked under the shadow of a hierarchical and elitist system now felt motivated and valued. Respect and collaboration replaced rivalry and disdain, and the spirit of teamwork began to flourish in a healthier, more positive environment. However, the road was not easy for Laura. Her new position also attracted criticism from some former colleagues who viewed her with skepticism. Some of the executives who had worked closely with Harvey were not in favor of the changes and resisted the new policies of inclusion and equity. Although they did not voice it openly, Laura sensed their distrust and knew she needed to demonstrate that her leadership was not merely symbolic, but a genuine force for change. With the support of Andrew, Lily, and James, Laura faced the criticisms with calmness and determination. Each time an executive questioned her decisions or attempted to resist the new policies, she responded with solid arguments, focusing on the long-term benefits for the company and for each employee. Her leadership style, based on empathy and dialogue, began to gain traction, and little by little, even those who had initially doubted her started to see the positive results of her management. One of the most significant moments for Laura came when she organized a general meeting with all employees to present the new code of ethics and the development and support programs. Facing an audience made up of people from all levels of the company, Laura spoke from the heart, sharing her vision and the values that had guided her journey. I know many of you have felt, as I have, that your work has not always been valued. I understand what it's like to face difficulties without receiving the recognition one deserves. But today, I want to assure you that in this new phase, each of you is important and valuable. It doesn't matter your position or where you come from. Here, effort and respect will be our pillars. Together, we will build a place where we can all grow and feel proud of what we do. The room erupted in applause, and many employees, visibly moved, approached Laura after the meeting to express their support and gratitude. At that moment, Laura felt that all the sacrifices and difficulties she had faced over the years had been worth it. For the first time, she felt at peace with her place in the world, and her success was not just personal. It reflected a change that would impact the lives of many people. Over time, the transformation in the company became evident. Employees worked with renewed motivation, knowing that their efforts were valued and that they had real opportunities for growth. The atmosphere of respect and collaboration that Laura had fostered became one of the company's main strengths, and it began to be recognized not only for its financial success, but also for its inclusive culture and ethical leadership. Despite the difficulties and criticisms, Laura remained steadfast in her principles. She knew her responsibility went beyond titles or financial goals. Her true purpose was to build a place where every person could feel safe, supported, and respected. And with every step she took, she felt she was fulfilling the promise she had made to herself and the legacy of dignity and empathy she wanted to leave behind. Thus, Laura solidified her position in the company, not as an authoritarian leader, but as a figure of inspiration and strength for all. Her story of sacrifice, perseverance, and courage became the symbol of a new era, and her name resonated in the company as that of someone who, despite adversities, had managed to transform a hostile environment into a space of hope and justice. As the months passed, the transformation in the company became evident in every corner. Employees walked through the halls with renewed energy and a sense of belonging that had previously been absent. The haughty looks and hierarchical barriers that had marked the environment in the past seemed to fade away, replaced by a spirit of collaboration and respect. Laura, now in her new leadership role, watched with satisfaction as her vision began to materialize. Her first major achievement was the success of the professional development program. Several employees who had previously felt trapped in their positions seized the opportunity to train, grow, and explore new areas of the company. Thanks to the mentorship system, workers at different levels began to collaborate and share their knowledge, enriching the learning environment. The barrier between lower-ranking employees and executives began to dissolve, and in its place, a culture emerged in which everyone had the opportunity to grow and achieve their goals. A clear example was Anna, a young financial analyst who had tirelessly worked on administrative tasks for years without anyone recognizing her true potential. By participating in the development program, Anna demonstrated exceptional skills in market analysis and was promoted to a role in the investments department. Inspired by Laura and supported by the mentoring committee, Anna found in the company a space where she could finally shine. Laura had also successfully pushed for the support fund for employees in vulnerable situations, which became one of the company's most significant projects. Thanks to this fund, employees like Carlos, a young father facing financial difficulties due to his child's illness, were able to receive financial and emotional assistance. Laura, aware of how important it was to provide support to those facing personal challenges, dedicated special attention to this program, ensuring that all employees knew they were not alone. Every week, Laura organized open meetings where employees could share their ideas and suggestions on how to improve the work environment. These meetings became spaces of trust where everyone, regardless of their position, could express their concerns and proposals. The active participation of employees helped strengthen the sense of community and gave Laura the opportunity to closely understand the needs of each team. The changes were also evident in the leadership structure. Lily and James, who had stood by Laura since the beginning of this transformation, took on more visible roles, acting as mentors and guides for the teams. Together with Laura, they ensured that each department operated under the values of respect and transparency. In every decision they made, these leaders remembered the purpose of the new era in the company, that success could not be achieved at the expense of people's dignity. Over time, the company began to gain a positive reputation in the industry, not only for its financial achievements, but also for its focus on ethics and inclusion. It became an example for other companies, which began to show interest in replicating the empathetic leadership model that Laura had implemented. Laura's story, which had gone from being an invisible employee to a respected leader, inspired others and showed that success could be achieved without losing humanity. One day, while gazing out at the office from the window of her new office, Laura reflected on the journey that had brought her there. She recalled every moment of sacrifice, every challenge, and every injustice she had faced. She knew her story was a testament to the fact that perseverance and dignity could transform even the most hostile environments. But more importantly, by changing her own destiny, she had also managed to change the destinies of all those who, like her, had been ignored and belittled. Her friendship with Carla grew even stronger in this new phase. Carla, who had always been her unwavering support, became her right hand in various employee development and wellness projects. Together, they organized activities to strengthen the bonds between employees, such as personal development workshops, leadership talks, and volunteer days. For Carla and Laura, these moments were not just work activities, but a way to honor the friendship and solidarity that had united them from the beginning. One of the most significant events they organized was a series of workshops on ethics and values in the workplace. They invited experts in leadership and personal development to speak about the importance of honesty, respect, and empathy in the work environment. The sessions became meeting points where employees shared their experiences and reinforced their commitment to the new values of the company. Through these workshops, Laura and Carla transformed the work environment into a space of constant reflection and learning. As the organizational culture continued to evolve, Laura understood that her leadership was reflected not only in the changes she had implemented, but also in the people she had inspired. Seeing employees at all levels collaborating, sharing, and growing together was her greatest achievement. The company had shifted from being a place of competition and hierarchy to one of respect and mutual support. Over time, Laura gained recognition not only from her colleagues and partners, but also from the entire industry. Her story was shared at conferences and business events as an example of ethical leadership and organizational transformation. For many, Laura had become a visionary leader, someone who had demonstrated that true strength lay not in status or power, but in the ability to maintain integrity and empathy at all times. Finally, on a quiet afternoon, as all the employees were busy with their activities, Laura took a moment to observe the impact of her work. From the window of her office, she saw her colleagues collaborating, helping each other, and sharing moments of camaraderie and respect. Beside her were Andrew, Lily, and James, who had supported her every step of this transformation. Laura knew that her success was not measured solely by visible achievements, but by the lasting change she had made in the lives of every person in the company. For her, the greatest achievement was having built a legacy of self-worth, dignity, and empathy that would endure in every corner of the company and in each of its employees. With a satisfied smile and the certainty that her efforts had been worthwhile, Laura returned to her desk and continued working, determined to keep building a place where respect and justice were the fundamental pillars. She knew that although her journey had been challenging, every step had led her to a destination where, finally, her voice and those of everyone else had found their place. And so, the company became a reflection of her leadership and the lesson Laura had always championed: that greatness is not measured by financial success or position, but by how we treat others. And with that, we reach the end of our story for today. I hope you enjoyed this journey and that in some way it inspired you to believe in the power of perseverance, dignity, and empathy. Remember that, no matter where you are or what your position is, your worth does not depend on the opinions of others, but on the strength you carry within and your ability to stay true to your principles. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe for more content that explores the value of effort and the power of the decisions we make every day. And leave me your comments below. I would love to hear your thoughts and if you have any similar experiences. Thank you for joining me on this journey. I'll see you in the next video, where we will continue exploring stories that inspire and transform. Until next time, and never forget that true success starts with believing in yourself.